Welcome to Priyam Technologies. I am Venkat. This is part 61 of SQL Server video series. In this video, we'll discuss about inserting large amounts of random data into SQL Server tables for performance testing. In the next video session, we'll use these large tables to test the performance of queries that uses joins and subqueries. Let's flip to SQL Server Management Studio. There are three parts to this SQL script. The first part will actually check if the tables exist, TBL products and product sales. If the tables exist, they will be dropped. And in the second part, we recreate those tables. And the final part will insert random sample data into those tables. Let's see how we are checking for the existence of those tables and dropping them. So to check the existence of tables, I'm using the system table called information underscore schema dot tables system table. Let's see what this table contains. So let's execute this query. Select star from information underscore schema dot tables. Now look at this. This query has returned me a list of table names. Where are these tables present? These tables are present in the sample database. Because we executed this query within the context of the sample database, I got all the tables that are present within that sample database. And we are checking here if the table name is product sales table. So do we have product sales table within that information underscore schema dot tables? Yes. And we are passing that to exist function. This exist function will return true if the table exists, otherwise it's going to return false. So if this function returns true, that means the table is present, we want to drop it. So drop table TBL product sales. Okay, so that will drop TBL product sales, and this query will drop TBL products table. So at the moment, look at this, we have TBL product sales and products table. Let me execute this query. Command completed successfully. Now if I refresh this, we shouldn't see those tables. So that's the first part of the query. It checks if the tables exist, and if they do, it's going to drop them. The second part will actually recreate those tables. Create table products table and product sales table. Okay, and the important thing to notice here is that product ID is a foreign key. So this is referring the ID column in TBL products table. Okay, so I'm going to create TBL products table and TBL product sales table. Let's refresh this tables folder here. We should have those tables back now. Okay, so the third and final step is to actually insert sample data. Inserting sample data into this tables is very simple and straightforward. So if you look at TBL products table, it has got three columns within that: ID, name, and description. ID column is the identity column. So when we are creating the table, we told ID is an identity column, meaning when we insert a row into this table TBL products, we don't have to supply a value for the identity column. We only need to supply values for name and description columns, which are of type nvar_char. Okay, so the name is going to be dynamically computed. So the name of the product, since this is a random data, I'm going to call my products as product 1, product 2, product 1000, etc. Similarly, product description is going to be product 1 description, product 2 description, etc. And how we are calculating the values for those names, look at that. I am doing this in a while loop. So while we declared a variable of type integer at ID, and the ID is initialized to 1. So while that ID is less than or equal to 10,000, which means we are going to loop through this 10,000 times. I'm going to insert 10,000 products into TBL products table. So what we are doing, insert into TBL products values. So first we need to supply the value for name column. So this is the hard-coded text product hyphen, and to that what we are doing, we are concatenating the ID value. First time the ID value will be 1, so 1. We are converting that to an nvar_char because ID is an integer variable, but since we are concatenating that to another string, we need to typecast that to be of type nvar_char, which is what we are doing here. So that will give me product value for the name column product 1, and this one will give me product 1 description, which is going to be the value for description column. The same thing product, that's the hard-coded string. To that we are concatenating ID, which is going to be 1 the first time, and then another hard-coded string description. Okay, so this is going to be the value for description column, this is going to be the value for name column, and we have this insert statement inside this while loop. Okay, so it's going to run 10,000 times, and look at this, we are printing ID. This is for tracking the progress when this query is running. and finally we are incrementing the value by 1. This is most important, otherwise the loop will never end. At some point of time we want the ID to be 10,000 so that the loop can end, otherwise this will become a never-ending loop. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this query and see what happens. So execute query, executing query, look at the messages, look at the rows are being inserted. Okay, 5,000, 6,000. The query has just completed successfully. So when we scroll down, you should see 10,000 rows. Now let's select data and see if it is present. So select star from TBL products, press F5, look at that. Here I get 10,000 rows in the status bar, and look at the name and description. Product 1 is the name, product 1 description is the description. Okay, so the next step is to actually insert random data into TBL product sales table. Now this is a bit, I wouldn't say it's complex because here we have 1, 2, 3 columns. So this TBL product sales table has again got total 4 columns. Within that, ID is again the identity column, so we don't have to supply a value for that. But whereas we have to supply values for product ID, unit price, and quantity sold columns. And if you remember, product ID is a foreign key. This value must match with one of the values that are present in TBL product sales table, products table for this ID column. So it has to match up with that. So if you remember, within TBL products we have IDs between 1 and 10,000. Okay, so when I insert a row into this TBL product sales table, product ID has to be a number between 1 and 10,000. Okay, unit price can be any random number, quantity sold can also be any random number, but then unit price and quantity sold, I'm going to have a random number between 1 and 10, but whereas product ID will be a random number between 1 and 10,000. It can't fall outside of those values. That's because it's a foreign key to the ID column in TBL products table. Okay, so to understand this, all you have to do is, we are going to use again while loop. Look at that. So while, and I'm going to insert 15,000 rows because I might have sold one product maybe 10 times. It's possible, right? So we're going to have 15,000 rows within TBL product sales table. Look at this again. Insert into TBL product sales. I have this random product ID, random unit price, and random quantity sold. Variables. So what are these? These are the variables. And what are these variables? We are using round and rand functions to generate a random product ID, random unit price, and random quantity sold. Okay, let's see how we are generating. And if you remember, we spoke about this. The product ID should be a random number between 1 and 10,000, whereas unit price and quantity sold should be a random number between 1 and 10. Now let's see how to generate a random number using rand and round functions, and that's very simple to do. All you have to do is know how to use this rand and round function. We have spoken about these random and round functions in the previous sessions of this video series. Please check those if you haven't watched them already. So first, let's see how to actually compute the values. Let's say I want you to write a script which will generate random numbers between a given range. For example, I want to generate a random number between 1 and 10. So I'm going to declare a variable of type integer at LL, lower limit, and I'm going to set that to 1. So my lower limit is going to be 1, and along the same lines I'm going to create another variable of type integer. So declare at upper limit, and that's going to be integer. I want to set that, let's say 5. Let's say I want to generate random numbers between 1 and 5. Okay, so I have created two variables of type integer, initialized them to 1 and 5. So my lower limit is going to be 1 and upper limit is going to be 5. So how do I generate a random number between 1 and 5? So I'm going to use this rand function for that. But then look at this. What I'm going to do, first I'm going to subtract from the upper limit the lower limit. Okay, and then I'm going to multiply that with rand function. Okay, so random function. Okay, let's execute this as it is. Okay, let's execute this entire code. Now if you look at this, I get a random number. Look at that. I execute 0.9. I got 1, 3, 1, 3, 3, 0. I don't want 0. I want a number between 1 and 5. So, but with this piece of code, I'm getting number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. but I'm not getting 5 and I'm getting 0. So what I basically can do to this, add 1. Okay, so now let's execute all this together. Now I should always get a number between 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, but then I have decimal places. We'll get rid of those decimal places in just a bit. So how to get rid of those decimal places? Use the round function. That's what the round function is for. So I'm going to use the round function. So which is the number I want to round? I want to round this number, okay, whatever is returned by this expression. I want to round that number. And how many decimal places I want? I want 0 decimal places. That's it. So now let's execute this all together. Look at this, I get 4, 2, 1, 3, etc. Just to make sure that it's working, according to our expectations, let's put in a simple testing code for this. I want to quickly test this. So I'm going to use, while, a while loop here, while let's say 1 is equal to 1. Just to convince you guys, it always generates numbers between 1 and 5. So while 1 is equal to 1, that means this condition will always be true. I'm creating a never-ending loop here. So while 1 is equal to 1, begin end. So what do I want to do? I want to generate this random number in an infinite loop. Okay? So generate random number. So to hold that number, what I'm going to do, I'm going to declare a variable. So declare at rand, I'm going to say integer. So let's take that variable. So I'm saying at random, so we are initializing this variable with whatever random number we get, and print that. So print that random number so we can see it. So print that random number, and then what I'm going to say, I'm going to use a if condition here. If that at random number is less than 0, so it cannot be less than 1. It cannot be less than 1 because we want a random number between 1 and 5. So if it is less than 0 or less than 1, or if that random number is greater than 5, that means our code is wrong. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to have another begin and end. I'm going to print saying error, and we want to see what is that number that is generated. So I'm going to, okay, so anytime if it comes to this if block, we know that that number is less than 1 or it is greater than 5, in which case our script, this piece of script which is generating the random number, is incorrect. So what we are going to do here, we are going to cast that and print that incorrect number. So that's an integer, so I'm going to cast that to be of type nvarchar, maybe 4. Okay, so let's execute this script. So if we execute this script now, it should never end, because I am confident this piece of script here is going to always generate a number between 1 and 5. It is never going to be less than 1 or greater than 5. And what I want to do is, after we print, we want to break out of the loop. Okay, so if it comes here, we know for sure it prints error message and it breaks out of this while loop. If it is not coming out of that while loop, then we know for sure it's always going to generate numbers between 1 and 5. A quick test basically. So I execute that. Look at this executing query. It's still executing. It's more than 5 seconds now. So if I go to the messages, look at this, it's printing those numbers, and it's never going to end. We have to cancel that at some point of time. Look at this, it's still executing. Let me cancel that. Okay, and if you look at these numbers, these always will be between 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. I mean between 1 and 5 basically. Okay, now just to make this a little bit interesting, I'm going to say where at random is greater than or equal to 5. Now if we execute this, look at that, we got 4, 4, 2, 3. At some point of time it ended. Okay, now let me execute that. Look at that, 2, 5 and then error. Okay, so it's working. It's only generating the numbers between 1 and 5. So our script is working as expected. So we have just seen how to generate random numbers between a given range. We are declaring two variables, initializing them to 1 and 5, and it is this simple piece of code which generates random number between a given range. Okay, so if we have understood that, the rest of the script should be very straightforward. So to insert data into TBL product sales table, we need values for product ID, unit price, and quantity sold, all of them of type integers. Okay, so I have created two variables, upper limit for product ID, lower limit for product ID. Now the lower limit for product ID is going to be 1, and the upper limit is going to be 8,500. You can make it 10,000 if you want, but I have just chosen 8,500 because when I do a left join, if I basically want to use this for the next video session to demonstrate the performance of subqueries and joins. Okay, so I don't want all the products in TBL product sales table, so I'm going to have 1500 of them not present in TBL product sales table. Okay, and the unit price is going to be a number between 1 and 100, or it can be 1 and 10. It's up to you. And the same is the quantity is again 1 and 10. Okay, so these are all declaration of variables and initializing them. And finally, what we are doing, we are having a while loop here which starts at 1 and loops through 15,000 times. So we are going to have 15,000 records inserted. And obviously, what is this script doing here? It is generating a random product ID, random unit price, and random quantity sold. It's exactly the same thing that we have seen how to just now, how to generate a random number. Okay, and then we are inserting those values into this table, and we are printing the counter, incrementing the counter by 1. Okay, so let's execute this script and see if it inserts 15,000 rows. So executing query. So in the messages you should see it's still executing 4,000, 4,900, 9,400, 12,400, and query completed successfully 15,000. So now if we go back to the tables, we should see 10,000 records in products and 15,000 records in TBL product sales table. So look at that, 10,000 in TBL products, 15,000 in TBL product sales table. So if you look at TBL product sales table, we have product ID, unit price, and quantity sold, some random numbers. Okay, so we have seen how to insert 10,000 and 15,000 rows, but if you want, you can even insert 1 million, 2 million rows. All you have to change is the number for this while loop. That's about it. Okay. On this slide, you can find resources for ASP.NET, C# and SQL Server interview questions. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.